thousands of years ago, and to the 150 million who were exterminated across the Western.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Community Classroom. This is Dr. Tracey McCarthy, psychologist, attorney, and educator, and what we're going to be talking about today is the legal right to the Indian/Native/ADOS/DACS identity. Now, just so that you know, we are not covering strictly cultural and ethnic issues on this channel alone. So that material is being moved as we speak. It's being moved to Patreon, and there will be lots of resources available over there. It'll be a significantly more peaceful space, and I will come back and give you some information about those resources. But when it comes down to legal issues as they relate to identity, we will address those issues here, or when we're talking about psychological issues related to identity, we will address those here also. And also when you combine those two, you have forensic issues. And so what we're going to talk about today is we're going to address the misuse of phenotype to determine maternity and paternity and ancestral lineage related to legal standing. And this issue comes up quite a bit related to Indian identity, Native American identity, ADOS identity. And so we're going to grapple with this issue, and we're going to talk about phenotype. And so we're going to look at this issue of phenotype and how people are misusing phenotype to make these determinations. And phenotype is basically, what somebody looks like. So their skin color, their hair texture, hair color, their eye color, eye shape, the shape of their head, their lips, their nose, their actual body shape, and even blood type. And so to have this discussion, we're going to look at a prominent example that is going on right now regarding this whole phenotype dynamic being used to determine someone's ancestry. And then we're going to look at the implications for this current dynamic for those who are identifying as Indian, Native American, ADOS, DACS. We're going to look at the implications for those groups and for those groups making those claims of identity. And so we're going to look at how this current event can be extrapolated and applied to other groups. Okay, so let's get started. And as a quick reminder, if this video appears on anything other than Dr. Tracey McCarthy, it is stolen and unauthorized. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at this problem of using phenotype to establish a legal right related to ancestry. And we're talking about maternity for however long you want to go back, or we're looking at paternity for however long you want to go back. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at this example using the epicanthic fold. It's a tongue twister. Okay. And so we're going to look at phenotype. And as a reminder, phenotype is that set of observable characteristics in an individual. And, it's sort of group dependent. And so it's definitely related to ethnicity and the environment that a person is coming from. Okay, so let's look at this epicanthic fold, and it's basically, it's a fold of skin that's over the upper eyelid, and it covers the inner corner of the eye, and then it runs from the nose to the inner side of the eyebrow. And we're going to look at some depictions so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And so this is traditionally considered normal in people of Asiatic descent, and then for some non-Asian infants when the nose bridge has not fully formed. And so so you will see that. You'll often see the epicanthic fold in children with Down syndrome, also with fetal alcohol syndrome. Sometimes you will see that. And there are high frequencies in certain areas, so you will be more prone to see it in groups such as East Asians and Southeast Asians and Central Asians and North Asians and South Asians. And then you'll see it also frequently in Polynesians and Micronesians and Native Americans, and also the Khoisan. So you can be on the lookout for it. And so we're going to look at some examples. There's a very low frequency in most Europeans. So a low frequency would be in English people or Irish people, Hungarians, and Russians. And so what you're going to primarily see is that this is pretty prevalent among those of Asian descent. It's kind of how you can kind of tell that someone has some Asian ancestry, or they are genetically related to people who are currently classified as Asian. So let me correct that.
To those that make it back to live and fight.
Okay, so what you can see here are some examples of the epicanthic fold across ethnic groups. And so this is across the world. You can see different ethnic groups, which you might consider races. You can see different ethnic groups and how it looks with different ethnic groups. And so we have some individuals who are of quote-unquote European descent and quote-unquote Asian descent and quote-unquote African descent. And so you can see the multiplicity of manifestations. And you can see it's most prominent in people who are traditionally classified as Asian, and then individuals who are traditionally classified as African, and then people who are traditionally classified as Native American versus American Indian. Sometimes those are not seen as interchangeable, so we'll just specify that. And this is particularly important for individuals who are identifying as Native American, identifying as Indian, because this epicanthic fold is considered to be part of a phenotype that is indicative of Native American heritage. And so sometimes people will look at people and try to eyeball people to determine whether or not they actually have Native American ancestry. And ancestry is basically just your paternity and your maternity, who your people are. And so people will look at this to determine whether or not they believe that a person has this ancestry. And so we're going to talk about why this is problematic. And so what we're going to look at now is an example of the epicanthic fold in an individual who is traditionally identified in terms of eyeballing the person. This person would be traditionally identified as quote-unquote white. However, you will notice when you look at this individual that aside from skin color, and the person does have a very swarthy look, and the person has very dark hair but very light eyes. And so what you see is you see the epicanthic fold. You also see a nose and a nose bridge that is not particularly Nordic at all. And so you also see very full lips for a person who would be identified as a European or European American person. So their lips and their eyes are rather distinct, and so you can see a little comparison there. So you can see someone, two individuals who are of similar age, and you can see their lips, and that phenotype looks more Nordic, and also the skin color looks more Nordic than the skin color of the little girl that you can see on the screen or the older girl that you can see off to the left. And so what this is suggestive of is that this individual has something else going on in terms of phenotype, something else other than a standard quote-unquote European or standard quote-unquote white ancestry. And one of the things this brings up is this question of what exactly does a quote-unquote person who identifies as white, what do they look like? What does a person who quote-unquote identifies as black, what do they look like? And then again, what does someone who is quote-unquote Indian or Native American, what exactly do they look like? Now, for those of you who are familiar with Creole culture, you might look at this person and you might identify this person as looking like what would be known as like an octoroon or a quadroon. And so there is something that appears to be one drop. You're talking about the one drop rule. There is something that appears to be present here other than a purely Nordic identity. And so now let's look and see what this other identity may be. So what kinds of questions might you come up with in terms of trying to understand the ancestry, the lineage of this particular individual? Would you just automatically assume that this person is quote unquote white, or would you assume that there's some sort of perhaps racial or ethnic ambiguity going on with this individual?
For ancestors yet to come, we are the land.
And now let's look at this question of what does an Indian or a Native American look like? It's the same question you can ask when you think about a European. What does a European person look like? What does an African person look like? What does an Asian person look like? And people have phenotypes in their heads. They have stereotypes. They have schemas in their heads regarding what someone should or should not look like based upon their identity. And so for a number of people, they might be using this copper-colored penny type of identity to identify people who may or may not be American Indian, indigenous, aboriginal people. And so you can see on the screen, depending on what kind of penny you have and whether the penny is bright and shiny or it's a little dull or tarnished, different people can fit into this category of this copper colored skin color. And so you can see the individuals on the screen, particularly the one to the left. The female has decidedly copper colored skin, very dark hair. And so an individual might readily say, yes, this person does look like the stereotype of a Native American.
And those who exploit even our own, to those who fall for the lies and join the dividing lines.
And for those of you who are familiar, this is Elizabeth Warren, and Elizabeth Warren is under attack. She's under constant attack because of her claim of Native American ancestry. And so she is saying that that is her lineage, that is a part of her lineage, and that this is a part of her family's oral tradition. And so she has been under attack for a significant amount of time. It's coming from multiple directions. And so she has made several efforts to demonstrate that this is her understanding of her ancestry. And when I say ancestry, I'm not talking about culture, I'm just talking about ancestry in terms of lineage, in terms of bloodline. And so that is the bloodline that she claims. And what has happened is that people basically look at her phenotype. They see, blondish hair, they see blue eyes, they see light skin, and the determination has been that by many people that not only is she not Indian, not only not Native American, but that she is perpetuating what is known as a lie. So she has been fighting this for quite a while. And this dynamic also is going on with Indians who look, in terms of skin color, they look as though they are what's called quote unquote black or quote unquote African. And so because they have that phenotype and their hair is not black and straight, they also are under attack. And it doesn't matter that their families have been here since before Columbus was here. This attack persists. And so this is also an attack that is going to come for individuals who are identifying as ADOS or DACS. So that would be American descendants of slavery or descendants of American chattel slavery. And so that issue will be coming up for those individuals also, as people feel the need to fight about boundaries and who has a right to claim what identity. And so one of the things I want you to think about is when you look at this picture, these pictures of Elizabeth Warren, think about the question of, is she Native American? Is she Indian? Does she even have a phenotype that is similar to Native Americans or what you would consider Indians? For the most part, people would often tend to say no, that she has blondish looking hair, she has bluish looking eyes, and she has light skin. One of the things I want to call your attention to is that she has relatively dark roots. And so there is a suggestion that perhaps this might not be her natural hair color. Elizabeth Warren also has swarthy skin color. Her skin color is not the color of a Nordic individual, which the blondish hair would suggest. Her skin color is very yellowish. She has a yellowish undertone to her skin color now, and some might even say that there's a little reddishness to it, and you can see it more prominently on the picture to the left, but then even when you look at her on the right, you can see that her skin color is not sort of pink, and so her skin color does not look particularly Nordic when you look at it in terms of close examination.
Were exterminated across the Western Hemisphere in the first 400 years' time.
And now for our surprise. We're going to look at the screen and we're going to make some observations regarding this whole phenotype issue and who can and cannot identify as anything from American Indian to descendant of American slaves. We're going to look at that here. And so one of the things I want to point out to you is when we looked at that little girl's picture earlier on, we noticed that she has extremely full lips for a little girl who would be identified as Nordic or quote-unquote white. And she has features that are not completely consistent with being Nordic. Now, the important thing to note is that all of these pictures are Elizabeth Warren. And when you look at the different iterations of Elizabeth Warren, you can see that there may be something else going on there other than simply this pure European Nordic identity. Now, she does identify as American Indian and has apparently been identifying as American Indian for a very long time. A couple of things to make note of is that she's from Oklahoma. And so when you think about who was in Oklahoma, who was transported to Oklahoma, it may make perfect sense that this would be a part of her heritage. Again, she is under a significant amount of scrutiny right now, and people are very quick to tell her who she is and who she is not. And those of you who are identifying as ADOS, you're identifying as Indian, you will, if you continue to assert that identity, you are going to come under similar scrutiny as people attempt to define you by your phenotype, and they attempt to define you based upon their projections about who you should and shouldn't be and what that should or shouldn't mean for you socially, psychologically, biologically, politically, legally. And so you do need to be mindful of the fact that whatever test Elizabeth Warren is undergoing right now, it will be the same test that you will be going under as you start to talk more about restorative justice, as you start to talk more about asserting your communal rights in terms of your understanding of your ancestry.
To the outsiders who step in, good or bad, and those of us who don't know better, to the leaders and prisoners of
And for those of you who are going to be pursuing your identity further and clarifying your ancestry and making assertions in terms of rights related to that ancestry, just remember that whatever Elizabeth Warren is being tested by will be the same test that will be used for you, and that's whether you are considered an organic Indian, and I use organic because the civilized tribes would be the antithesis of organic, and so the only ones who would be in this fight really would be those organic, uncivilized Indians, and also those who are identifying as American descendants of slavery and descendants of American chattel slavery. There will be tests to determine whether or not people believe that that is your identity. And it is incumbent upon each of you to pursue understanding your ancestry individually. Too often people are trying to focus on the macro level. There's a lot of macro level focus. That macro level focus is not going to help you. Because when it all comes down, when you mark that census box, you need to be able to demonstrate in some sort of way that that actually is your identity. People can look alike. People can have the same phenotype and be from totally different continents. And so that phenotype does not give you a legal right. And so if you want that legal right related to that identity, you are going to need to do the work to show that that is your ancestry. Those are your mothers and those are your fathers. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care and see you soon.
We are the land. This is dedicated to our relatives before us, thousands of years ago, and to the 150 million who were exterminated across the Western Hemisphere in the first 400 years' time, starting in 1492. To those who have kept their